The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and 12-year-old Elias Vance pressed his face against the cold window to see Galactic Concord Station for the first time in his life. It was massive beyond anything he had imagined, a spinning wheel of metal and light floating in the darkness of space, home to thousands of aliens from dozens of worlds that humanity had only dreamed about a century ago. His mother stood behind him and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to our new home," she said with a tired smile on her face. Ambassador Catherine Vance was humanity's first permanent representative to the Galactic Concord, a coalition of alien species that had been watching Earth for centuries, and had only recently decided that humans were worthy of a seat at their table. Elias knew what that really meant, because he had heard the whispers and read the reports that his mother thought she had hidden from him. Concord and the weakest too. They had barely mastered interstellar travel, while other species had been sailing between stars for thousands of years. To the aliens of the Concord, humans were like children who had just learned to walk and were now stumbling into a room full of giants. The airlock opened, and Elias stepped onto the station with his mother by his side. The first thing he noticed was the smell, a strange mix of metal and flowers, and something wild that made his nose twitch. The second thing he noticed was the aliens. They were everywhere, walking and slithering and floating through the wide corridors of the station. Some had scales that shimmered like rainbows in the artificial light. Others had tentacles that waved gracefully as they moved. A few looked almost human, except for their blue skin or their 4 arms, or the extra eyes that dotted their foreheads. But none of them compared to the Kelthari, first Kelthari warrior, standing guard at the end of the corridor. And he stopped breathing for a moment. The alien was nearly 3 meters tall, with silver fur that caught the light like moonbeams, and 6 eyes that glowed with an amber fire. Its body was lean and powerful, like a great cat ready to pounce, and its mane flowed down its back in waves of bioluminescent color that shifted from blue to purple to gold as Elias watched. The Kelthari turned those 6 eyes toward him, and Elias felt a chill run down his spine as the creature made a sound deep in its chest, a rumbling growl that the universal translator on his wrist rendered as "human child" in a flat mechanical voice. But Elias heard something more in that growl, something the translator did not catch, a tone of amusement mixed with contempt that needed no translation at all. "Come along," his mother said softly as she pulled him forward, "and do not stare, because it is considered rude among most species." Elias nodded, but he could not help glancing back at the Kelthari warrior one more time before they turned the corner. Over the next few days, Elias learned many things about his new home. He learned that the Kelthari were the dominant power in this sector of space, proud warriors with a civilization that stretched back 10,000 years. He learned that they communicated through a complex system of growls and purrs and subsonic frequencies that most species could not even hear, combined with patterns of light in their manes and scent markers that carried meaning humans could not detect. He learned that universal translators could only capture about 40% of what Kelthari actually said, which meant that most conversations with them were filled with gaps and misunderstandings. And he learned that the Kelthari children on the station had already decided that they did not like him. The lower levels of the station alone. He had found a quiet observation deck where he could watch the stars and think about all the strange things he had seen. Then the door opened, and 3 young Kelthari walked in. They were smaller than the adults, but still towered over Elias, their silver fur marked with the dark stripes that indicated they had not yet reached maturity. The leader was a male named Vexthar, the son of High Commander Felvex, the most powerful Kelthari on the station. Elias knew this because he had spent hours studying the station records and memorizing the names and faces of everyone important. "Look what we have found," Vexthar growled, as he circled around Elias with his siblings close behind. a little mewling prey thing all alone. The translator gave Elias the words, but not the full meaning. He could tell from the way the young Kael'thari's mane flickered with harsh red light that the insult was far worse than what he heard. "I am Elias," he said as he tried to keep his voice steady, "and I am pleased to meet you." The Kael'thari laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together that made Elias wince. "It speaks," Vexthar said to his companions, "but does it understand anything, I wonder?" He leaned close to Elias, and his 6 eyes narrowed into slits of gold. "You are Kethra," he growled, and the translator said the word meant observer. But Elias saw the way the other Kael'thari reacted with cruel amusement, and he knew that was not the real meaning at all. "Your people are weak," Vexthar continued as his mane flashed with colors Elias could not interpret. "And you will always be weak, because you are deaf and blind and your noses are useless lumps of flesh on your flat little faces." He shoved Elias hard, and the boy stumbled backward and fell against the cold metal wall. "Stay out of our way, Kethra," Vexthar warned as he turned to leave, "or we will teach you what happens to prey that forgets its place." The 3 Kael'thari walked out laughing, and left Elias alone, with his bruised shoulder and his burning shame. He wanted to cry, but he did not. Instead, he sat there in the darkness, and watched the stars, and made a decision that would change everything. He would learn their language, not the broken version that came through the translator, but the real language, every growl and purr and flash of light and hidden scent. He would learn it all, and then he would understand exactly what they were saying about him and his people. Elias pulled out his personal tablet and opened a new file. He typed 2 words at the top of the empty page, Kael'thari language. Then he began to take notes on everything he had observed, the sounds and the colors, and the way the young aliens had moved when they spoke. His mother was too busy with politics to notice his pain, and he had no friends on this station full of aliens who saw him as nothing more than a curiosity. But Elias had something that none of them suspected. He had a gift for patterns, for seeing connections that others missed, for learning languages faster than anyone thought possible. The doctors on Earth had called it hyperlexia, and had told his mother that her son was special in ways they did not fully understand. Now, Elias would use that gift to prove that humans were not the weak little prey things that the Kael'thari believed them to be. He would learn their sacred language that no outsider had ever mastered, and then he would make them listen. Weeks passed on Galactic Concord Station, and Elias Vance became a ghost. He moved through the corridors like a shadow, quiet and small and easy to ignore, which was exactly what he wanted. Every morning, he would leave his family's quarters before his mother woke up, and he would find places where Kael'thari gathered to talk and eat and argue with each other. He sat in corners of crowded dining halls, with his tablet hidden under the table, recording everything he heard. He stood in the back of observation decks and watched Kael'thari officers give orders to their crews, while he took notes on the patterns of light in their manes. He even followed groups of Kael'thari through the market levels, staying far enough behind that they did not notice him, but close enough to catch every growl and purr that escaped their lips. At night he returned to his tiny bedroom and studied his recordings for hours, until his eyes burned and his head ached. Translator was useless for what he needed, so he turned it off and listened to the raw sounds of Kael'thari speech. At first it was just noise, a jumble of growls and rumbles that made no sense to his human ears. But slowly, day by day, patterns began to emerge from the chaos. He noticed that certain growls always appeared at the beginning of statements, while others marked questions or commands. He saw that the lights in Kael'thari manes did not flash randomly, but followed specific sequences depending on who they were talking to and what they were talking about. He learned to recognize the subsonic frequencies that his tablet could detect, even when his ears could not. Low vibrations that seemed to carry emotional weight, like sadness or anger or joy. His notebooks filled with observations and theories and diagrams that looked like the work of a madman. The station's linguistic archives had almost nothing on Kelthari language. Aliens had refused to share their tongue with lesser species for centuries. They considered their language sacred, a gift from their ancestors that was not meant for the ears of outsiders. The only information Elias could find came from the records of an extinct species called the Valorian, avian scholars who had spent 300 years trying to crack the Kelthari code before their homeworld was destroyed by a dying star. The Valorians had failed, but their notes gave Elias a starting point. Meanwhile, the mockery continued. Vexthar and his companions seemed to take special pleasure in tormenting the little human boy who wandered the station alone. They would find him in corridors and force him against walls while they spoke rapidly in their own language, filling the air with sounds and colors and scents that the translator could barely touch. "Listen to us, Kethra," Vexthar would growl with his mane blazing red and gold. "Can you hear what we are saying about your pathetic species? Can you smell the truth of our contempt?" His companions would laugh and add their own insults in layers of meaning that went far beyond what the translator reported. Elias heard the word deaf-nose many times, and pray-thing even more, but there were other words too, words that the translator could not even attempt to render in human speech. He recorded everything. When they shoved him down and walked away laughing, he picked himself up and added their words to his growing database. When they mocked his small size and his dull senses, he noted the exact frequencies of their growls and the precise patterns of their main lights. Every insult became a lesson, and every act of cruelty became data for his research. Other species on the station watched this with something like pity in their alien eyes. The blue-skinned Therali shook their heads sadly when they saw the small human child sitting alone in the dining hall. The four-armed Cathani sometimes offered him kind words in broken English, but never intervened when the Kelthari youth cornered him. Everyone knew that humans were at the bottom of the Concord's hierarchy, and no one wanted to anger the powerful Kelthari over something as small as a diplomat's son. Elias understood this and did not blame them for their silence. He was fighting his own battle, and he did not need allies, only time. One night, everything changed when Elias was reviewing his recordings in bed. He had isolated a particular conversation between two Kelthari merchants in the market, a simple exchange about prices and goods that the translator had rendered in flat, boring terms. But when Elias listened to the raw audio for the 20th time, he suddenly heard something new. The growls and the subsonic tones and the main patterns were not separate channels of communication as he had assumed. Whole, like different instruments playing the same song at the same time. Kelthari language was not linear, like human speech, where one word followed another in a straight line. It was harmonic, with multiple layers of meaning stacking on top of each other, like the notes of a musical chord. The growls carried grammar and structure. The subsonic frequencies carried emotion and tense, telling listeners whether something happened in the past or would happen in the future. The bioluminescent main patterns indicated social status and intent, showing whether the speaker was addressing someone above or below them in the hierarchy. And the scent markers, which Elias could not detect directly but could infer from context, seemed to indicate whether the speaker was being sincere or deceptive. It was beautiful. It was the most complex and elegant form of communication Elias had ever encountered. A language that required the speaker to coordinate their entire body in perfect harmony to convey even the simplest message. No wonder universal translators failed so badly. No wonder no outsider had ever learned to speak Kelthari. You could not learn this language by studying grammar books or memorizing vocabulary lists. You had to feel it in your bones and hear it with your whole being. Elias stayed up all night building a new device from parts he had salvaged from broken equipment around the station. It was a multi-spectrum analyzer that could detect sounds across a wider range than human ears, pick up the bioluminescent patterns of Kael'thari manes, and even identify some of the chemical compounds they used as scent markers. The device was crude and ugly, held together with tape and wire and hope. But when Elias tested it the next morning, by secretly recording a Kael'thari family having breakfast in the dining hall, he saw their conversation transformed into waves and colors and data streams on his tablet screen. For the first time he could see the full shape of their words. For the first time he understood why Vexthar's insults hurt so much worse than the translator suggested. The word Kethra did not mean observer at all. When Elias analyzed it properly with his new device, he saw the truth hidden in the subsonic layer and the scent context. Kethra meant something so low and worthless that it was not even worth the effort of killing. It meant a creature beneath contempt, beneath notice, beneath the dignity of hatred. It meant nothing. They had been calling him nothing for weeks, and laughing because he could not even understand the depth of their scorn. Elias stared at the translation on his screen for a long time. Then he saved the file and opened a new notebook. He had 11 months of work ahead of him, and he would need every single day. 11 months passed, and Elias Vance transforms from a confused child into something his tormentors could never have imagined. He had mapped 347 distinct phoneme combinations in Kael'thari speech. He had identified 12 emotional frequency bands in the subsonic layer of their language. He had cataloged at least 200 scent words, though he could only simulate them crudely with chemical mixtures he had created in his tiny bedroom. And he had learned to produce the bioluminescent patterns of Kael'thari manes, using a modified holoband that wrapped around his neck like a glowing collar. He could now understand almost 90% of what any Kael'thari said, not the broken fragments that the universal translator provided, but the full harmonic meaning of their words. He heard the poetry in their everyday speech, the way they layered respect and humor and history into simple greetings, the way their arguments contained subtle references to ancient heroes and forgotten battles. He heard the cruel precision of their insults and the warm depths of their affection when they spoke to those they loved. The Kael'thari language was not just communication, it was art. And Elias had spent nearly a year learning to appreciate its beauty, even as its speakers continued to treat him like dirt beneath their claws. He had not spoken a single word of Kael'thari to anyone. He was waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a cold station morning when alarms began to wail through the corridors, and Kael'thari officers rushed past Elias with panic in their 6 eyes. A patrol ship had gone missing near the Veth-Kora Nebula, a dangerous region of space where radiation storms could tear apart unprepared vessels. The ship carried 12 crew members, including Serath, the younger sister of Vexthar, and the daughter of High Commander Thelvex himself. Elias watched the chaos unfold from his usual hiding spot near the command center, his recording device capturing everything as Kael'thari warriors shouted orders, and technicians scrambled to trace the lost ship's signal. The distress beacon was weak and distorted, scattered by the nebula's radiation into fragments that the station's computers struggled to reassemble. Search teams launched within the hour, but they were flying blind, guessing at coordinates based on corrupted data. Elias analyzed the distress signal on his tablet, while the adults argued about where to send their ships. At first, he saw nothing but noise, the same jumbled mess that the Kael'thari technicians were fighting to decode. But then he noticed something strange in the subsonic layer of the transmission, a pattern that did not match the standard emergency protocols. Someone on that lost ship was embedding a second message beneath the official distress call. Elias recognized the technique from his months of Study, an ancient form of Kael'thari communication that modern speakers rarely used. It was called the Vreth Kothal, the voice of the old hunters, a way of hiding information inside other sounds that the poet warriors of ancient times had used to send secret messages across battlefields. The navigator of the lost ship was clever and brave, encoding their true position in a dialect so old that the modern Kael'thari officers could not even recognize it as language. Elias decoded the hidden message in less than 10 minutes. The ship was not where the rescue teams were looking. It had drifted into a deep pocket of the nebula, where the radiation blocked normal signals. But the navigator had found a way to punch through, using frequencies that the ancients had discovered thousands of years ago. Elias had the coordinates. He had the proof. He ran to the command center and pushed through the crowd of tall aliens until he reached the circle of officers surrounding High Commander Felvex. "I know where the ship is," he shouted up at them, his voice small and thin against the chaos of growls and alarms. "The navigator is sending a hidden message using the old hunter codes, and I can read it." Every Kael'thari in the room turned to look at him. For a moment there was silence except for the wailing of the alarms. Then Vexthar stepped forward, with fury blazing in his mane. "You dare," he growled, his 6 eyes narrowed with contempt. "You dare to speak of our sacred codes, you who cannot even hear the simplest greeting in our language. You who are Kethra, nothing, less than nothing." He grabbed Elias by the front of his shirt and lifted him off the ground. "My sister is out there dying, and you waste our time with your pathetic human lies." "Put me down," Elias said quietly, "and I will prove what I am saying." Vexthar laughed, a harsh grinding sound that echoed through the command center. "Prove it then, little prey thing. Show us all how a deaf-nosed human can read what our own scholars cannot." He dropped Elias to the floor, and the boy landed hard on his knees. Elias stood up slowly and took a deep breath. Then he did something that no human being had done in 300 years of contact between their species. He spoke in Kael'thari. Not the broken approximation that some diplomats had attempted, stumbling over growls while completely missing the subsonic and visual layers. Elias spoke in full harmonic Kael'thari, all 4 channels at once. His throat produced the growls and rumbles with an accent that marked him as a student rather than a native speaker, but still understandable. His holoband collar blazed with patterns of light that indicated respectful urgency and desperate sincerity. The chemical dispenser on his wrist released scent markers that screamed honesty and fear. "The navigator is encoding position data in the Vreth Kothal dialect," Elias said in their language, his words filling the command center with layers of meaning that every Kael'thari present could understand completely. "The true coordinates are 739 by 216 by 448 in the deep nebula pocket called the Sleeping Hunter. She is running out of air, and her engines are failing, but she is alive, and she is waiting for you to hear her." The room went absolutely silent. Vexthar stared at Elias with his mouth hanging open, and his mane flickering through colors that indicated shock and disbelief, and something that might have been shame. High Commander Thelvex pushed through his officers and knelt down in front of the small human boy. His 6 eyes studied Elias with an intensity that made the child want to run away and hide. "Say that again," the High Commander rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. Elias repeated the coordinates in Kael'thari, adding a formal plea for immediate action, using grammatical structures so old that they had not been spoken aloud for centuries. He had found them in the Valorian archives, remnants of a dead species' desperate attempt to understand the people who would outlive them. Felvex listened with his ears and his eyes and his nose, taking in every layer of meaning that Elias offered. Then the High Commander stood and turned to his officers. "New search coordinates," he commanded. "Launch all available ships to the sleeping hunter pocket, immediately. He looked down at Elias one more time. If you are wrong, human child, there will be consequences. I am not wrong, Elias said in Kalthari, his main lights pulsing with absolute certainty. Your daughter is waiting for you to find her. The rescue ships launched within minutes, and Elias stood alone in the command center, surrounded by Kalthari, who looked at him as if they had never seen a human being before in their lives. The hours that followed were the longest of Elias Vance's young life. He sat in a corner of the command center and watched the tracking screens, while Kalthari officers rushed around him, their voices a storm of growls and subsonic frequencies that he now understood perfectly. The rescue ships had entered the sleeping hunter pocket, where radiation made communication nearly impossible. For 2 hours there was nothing but static and silence. Ambassador Catherine Vance arrived at some point, and stood beside her son with confusion and worry written across her face. "Elias, what is happening?" she whispered. "They told me you spoke to High Commander Thelvex in their language, but that is impossible. No human has ever—" "I have been studying," Elias said, without taking his eyes off the screens, "for almost a year now." His mother stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. "You never told me. You were busy." Before she could reply, a subtle alert sounded, and the screens flickered. "Respond!" The communication array crackled to life, and a voice emerged from the static, weak but clear. "Command, this is Rescue Team Alpha. We have found the patrol ship. Repeat, we have found them." The command center erupted in cheers and howls of relief that shook the walls. The rescue team reported that all 12 crew members were alive, though badly dehydrated and suffering from radiation exposure. The ship's life support had failed 6 hours ago, but the navigator, a young female named Kethvara, had managed to seal the crew in the cargo bay where emergency supplies had kept them breathing. She had spent her last reserves of strength encoding the hidden message that Elias had decoded. Without those coordinates, the rescue teams would have searched the wrong sector of the nebula for days. By then, the crew would have been dead. High Commander Thelvex stood in the center of the room and listened to the reports with his mane cycling through. Colors of relief and pride, and something deeper that Elias recognized as profound gratitude. Then the High Commander turned and walked toward the corner where Elias sat with his mother. Every eye in the command center followed him. Thelvex stopped in front of the small human boy and looked down at him with all 6 of his amber eyes. "You gave us the truth when we would not listen," the High Commander said in Kalthari, his words layered with formal respect that Elias had never heard directed at any human. "You saved my daughter and 11 of my people when our own arrogance blinded us to the message she was sending." He paused, and his mane flickered with colors that indicated deep thought. "How did you learn to hear us, young one?" Elias stood up slowly and answered in Kalthari, his hollow-band collar glowing with patterns of humility and honesty. "I listened," he said. "For 11 months I listened to your people speak, and I watched the lights in your manes, and I studied the old records of the Valorian scholars who tried to understand you before their world died. I built devices to help me hear what my ears could not detect, and I practiced alone in my room until I could produce the sounds and the lights and the scents that carry meaning in your tongue." He looked up at the towering alien commander without fear. "Your language is beautiful, High Commander. It is not just words, but music and light and memory all woven together. I wanted to understand it, even when your people told me that I was Kethra and would never be anything more." A ripple of shock went through the watching Kalthari at the word Kethra. They had not expected a human to know that term, or to use it with such precise and bitter accuracy. Thelvex's eyes moved to his son, Vexthar, who stood frozen near the communication array, with shame burning in every color of his mane. "You called this child Kethra," the High Commander said, to his son in a voice that made the young Kael'thari flinch. "You called him nothing, worthless, beneath your notice." Vexthar could not meet his father's gaze. "I did not know," he stammered, his mane flickering with distress. "I did not think a human could ever—" "Could ever what?" Thelvex interrupted. "Could ever prove himself worthy of respect. Could ever master what we believed was impossible for lesser species. Could ever save your sister's life, while you stood by and called him dirt." The command center had gone completely silent. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath as the High Commander confronted his son. Vexthar dropped his head in the Kael'thari gesture of submission. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was blind, and I was cruel, and I have no excuse." "Do not apologize to me," Thelvex said coldly. "Apologize to him." The young Kael'thari turned toward Elias, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the predator and the prey, the bully and the victim. Then Vexthar lowered his head in the deepest bow that Kael'thari culture allowed, his mane dimming to colors of regret and genuine remorse. "I wronged you," he said in Kael'thari, every layer of his speech carrying sincere apology. "I mocked you and hurt you, and called you nothing when you were learning to be more than any of us believed possible. I do not ask for forgiveness, because I have not earned it. I only ask that you allow me the chance to prove that I can be better than I was." Elias considered the apology carefully. A year ago he had dreamed of this moment, of seeing his tormentors humbled and shamed, of having the power to reject their apologies and make them feel as small as they had made him feel. But standing here now, with the full weight of Kael'thari language flowing through his mind, Elias understood something that his younger self had not. Revenge was not the same as justice. Humiliation was not the same as respect. He had not learned their language to hurt them. He had learned it to be heard. "I accept your words," Elias said in Kael'thari, with his main lights glowing soft blue for peace and new beginnings. "What happened before is finished. What matters now is what we choose to do next." Vexthar looked up with something like wonder in his 6 eyes. "You speak like one of the old poet warriors," he said. "Where did you learn such grace?" "From your own people," Elias answered. "From listening to the way your elders talk to each other when they think no one is paying attention. From the songs your mothers sing to their children. From the prayers your priests offer at the shrines of your ancestors. Your language taught me how to be graceful, because that is what your language is made of." High Commander Thelvex made a sound deep in his chest that Elias recognized as rare and precious. Laughter, true laughter, the kind that came from genuine delight rather than mockery. "My daughter lives because of you," the High Commander said, "and my son has learned a lesson that I could not have taught him with 1,000 lectures. You have given my family 2 gifts today, little human, and I do not forget my debts." He placed one massive clawed hand on Elias's shoulder, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a fearsome creature. "The Council will want to meet you," Thelvex continued. "They will want to understand how a child of the youngest species in the Concord accomplished what our own scholars declared impossible. Are you prepared for that?" Elias looked up at the towering Kael'thari commander and smiled. "I have been preparing for a year," he said. "I think I am ready." The council chamber of the Kael'thari was the most magnificent room Elias Vance had ever seen. It was carved from a single massive crystal that had been brought from the Kael'thari homeworld centuries ago, its walls shifting through colors that responded to the emotions of those inside. 12 elders sat in a semicircle on raised platforms, their silver fur marked with the white streaks of great age, and their manes glowing with the soft, steady light of wisdom earned through long lives. High Commander Thelvex stood at the center of the chamber, with Elias beside him. a small human boy in simple clothes, surrounded by giants who had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Word of what had happened in the command center had spread across the station like fire. "The human child who speaks our tongue," they whispered in corridors and dining halls. "The deaf nose who heard what our own people could not." Elias had expected fear when he entered the council chamber. Instead, he felt only calm. He had spent a year preparing for this moment, even if he had not known it at the time. Learning not just the sounds and symbols of Kael'thari language, but the culture and history that gave those sounds meaning. He understood these elders better than they suspected. He knew the weight of tradition that pressed down on their shoulders, and the pride that sometimes blinded them to simple truths. He knew that they were not monsters or villains, but people, complicated and flawed, and capable of both cruelty and kindness, just like the humans they had dismissed as primitive. Elder Vorthana spoke first, her voice like wind through mountain caves. "You claim to speak our tongue," she said in Kael'thari, with layers of skepticism woven through every frequency. "Many have made such claims before. Scholars and diplomats and spies who thought they could pierce the veil of our language with machines and tricks. All of them failed. Why should we believe that a human child has succeeded where they could not?" Elias answered in full Kael'thari, his hollow band blazing with the patterns of formal respect due to an elder, while his voice carried the subsonic frequencies of absolute sincerity. "I do not ask you to believe, honored elder. I ask only that you listen. If my words ring false to your ears, then you will know it instantly, because our language does not permit deception to those who truly hear it. That is its greatest gift and its heaviest burden. When I speak to you now with all four voices in harmony, you can smell the truth on my breath, and see it in my light, and feel it in the frequencies that shake the air between us. I have nothing to hide from you, because your language makes hiding impossible." The elders exchanged glances that carried entire conversations in their flickering manes. Vorthana leaned forward, and her 6 eyes studied Elias with new interest. "Language as a gift and a burden," she said slowly. "That is not how outsiders usually describe it. They call it a barrier, or a puzzle, or a weapon we use to keep others at a distance. Why do you see it differently?" "Because I have lived inside it for a year," Elias replied. "When you cannot lie in your own tongue, you must learn to be honest with yourself in ways that other species never have to face. When every emotion colors your words, you cannot pretend to feel things you do not feel. When your main lights reveal your intentions, you cannot scheme in shadows. Your language has shaped your people into something unique in all the galaxy. Warriors who speak poetry, and poets who know how to fight. A species that values honor above all else, because dishonor is impossible to hide from anyone who can hear the truth in your voice." He paused, and let his words settle into the crystal walls. "I did not learn Kael'thari to spy on you, or gain advantage over you, because it was beautiful, and because I wanted to understand the people who spoke it, even when those people called me Kethra, and told me I would never be anything more than prey." The word Kethra landed like a stone in still water. Ripples of shock spread through the council chamber as the elders realized that this human child knew exactly what that word truly meant. Elder Thaxvar, the oldest member of the council with fur more white than silver, rose from his seat. "Who called you this name?" he demanded, his mane burning with anger. "Who dared to use that word against a guest of the Concord, against a child?" "It does not matter now," Elias said, with his mane lights pulsing the soft blue of forgiveness. "The one who called me Kethra has apologized, and I have accepted. Dwelling on past wrongs serves no purpose when there is a future to build." Thaxvar stared at the boy for a long moment. Then he did something that made every other elder gasp with surprise. He lowered his head in the gesture of acknowledging an equal, the same gesture that Vexthar had used in the command center, but coming from the eldest and most respected member of the council, it carried a weight that shook the very foundations of Kael'thari tradition. "You speak wisdom beyond your years, young one," Thaxvar said, "and you have already done more to bridge the gap between our peoples than a century of diplomatic negotiations ever achieved. The human who saved our navigator's crew deserves recognition that matches his deeds." He turned to address the full council. "I call for a vote," Thaxvar announced. "This human has mastered our sacred tongue. He has used that knowledge to save Kael'thari lives. He has shown grace and wisdom when he had every right to demand vengeance for the wrongs done against him. I say we grant him what no outsider has received in 500 years. I say we give him full linguistic exchange privileges and an invitation to study on our homeworld." The vote was unanimous. When it was done, High Commander Thelvex stepped forward with pride shining in his mane. "There is one more thing," he said. "My son wishes to speak." Vexthar walked into the center of the chamber and stood before Elias. The young Kael'thari who had once tormented him now looked at him with something like reverence. "I have searched the old records," Vexthar said in formal Kael'thari, "looking for a word to describe what you are. You are not one of us, but you speak as we speak, and hear as we hear. You are not a scholar or a diplomat or a friend. You are something new." He reached out and touched Elias's shoulder in the Kael'thari gesture of deep respect. "There is an ancient word that was last used 300 years ago to honor a hero who united the warring clans of our homeworld. I believe you have earned the right to carry it." Vexthar spoke a single word that resonated through the crystal chamber. Vrethkai. Elias did not recognize it. He looked to High Commander Thelvex for explanation. "It means one who hears the song," the High Commander said, with emotion thick in his voice. "It is the highest honor our people can give to one who understands not just our words, but our hearts. You are Vrethkai now, Elias Vance, and you will be remembered in our histories long after this day has passed into legend." The council chamber erupted in a sound that Elias had never heard before, the Kael'thari roar of celebration that signaled a moment of true triumph. As the sound washed over him, Elias felt tears running down his face. He had started this journey as Kethra, nothing, less than nothing. Now he stood among the proudest warriors in the galaxy, and they called him brother. After the ceremony ended, and the elders departed, a small figure approached Elias in the emptying chamber. It was Seraph, the young Kael'thari girl whose life he had helped save. She was smaller than her brother, with fur that still held the golden tint of youth and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. She stopped in front of Elias and took a deep breath. Then she spoke in broken, heavily accented English, the human words awkward on her tongue, but unmistakably sincere. "Thank you for save me," she said carefully. "I want learn your words like you learn mine. We study together. Yes?" Elias smiled at her and answered in gentle Kael'thari, "I would like that very much." Serath's mane blazed with joy, and she grabbed his hand in her clawed fingers. "Then we begin now," she said. "Teach me word for friend." "Friend," Elias said in English. "For end," Serath repeated with determination. It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. The Kethra had become a bridge between worlds, and the song of understanding had only just started to play.